cued in.
Here we go.
All right. So, good evening, good morning, wherever you are on the planet. Here I am in South Portland, Maine, and it is dark as death it seems like 2 p.m., but here we are, and I'm with Giovanni, who I had the pleasure of meeting at my main Men's Rites of Passage retreat in Albuquerque in the hills of uh, outside of Yamaz, I think it was called, but it was a 6-day retreat for men, and I had the pleasure of getting to watch and be, touched by Giovanni's teaching and presence and humor and all of that. And so, if you've been following my channel, we've got all these great interviews with people who have been, doing some inner work on their ramshackle personalities and learning how to develop humor and sometimes grace and navigating their personality patterns. And so Giovanni's going to give us the agony and the ecstasy of the type 1 as he feels free to do and share his story. So just want to thank you for being here, and just, I really so appreciated your presence and the other elders that were there. How that created such a warm and welcoming environment. So I was deeply moved, of course, being there. So that's why I wanted to interview you and again, to let people know that, there are a lot of men out there who are actually working on themselves who are quite beautiful. So that said, why don't you just share a little bit about what you're up to and how you learned about the Enneagram and how you transcended your personality.
Thank you, Michael, for this opportunity, and hello to all your audience and your followers. Giovanni Perez. I was born and raised in Guatemala, a country, just some of you, just in case you don't know the geography, south of Mexico and the northernmost part of Central America. So I migrated here to the United States when I was 17 years old. I guess I came about the Enneagram by way of Richard Rohr, and probably many have as well. In my incursion in Illuman, which is this wonderful organization to which you and I both are a part of, men kept talking about numbers, right? As a good number 6, I'm blah, 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 blah. So, and I didn't want to be boxed into a particular thing. But in my search of self-knowing, right, I was invited very gently to see if this was something that I might find of interest. So I did read Richard's book, and I was really enthralled and began to just be immersed in the conversation of the other brothers. It began to being crystallized and concretizing in the different personalities and aspects that I would see in each of the men. Attended a couple of retreats on that, done some study with my wife as well. So yeah, the line that was most helpful for me was Richard's, when he said, when you feel the humiliation of your number, that's it. And that seems to be at least partially true.
Yeah, that's certainly true for me. When I discovered I was a 4, it was a bit horrifying. Like, oh my God, somebody mapped out my interior neuroses and never met me. How did they do that? And yeah, so discovering your oneness what are the things that sort of come to mind as things that you observe and work with, or they work you and you notice later that they had their
Mhm.
way with you? I mean, what have you noticed in the course of your life around
Mhm.
type one?
Yeah.
And sometimes we call the one the reformer because they like to change things and reform and make things the best possible. And on a good day, they're absolutely great. And on a bad day, they're hard to bear. And this is true of all the types who say, all the types are awesome, but when they're less healthy, they're all a pain in the neck in their own way based on their type. So there's no exceptions to that. Uh, yeah. So, and I often think of the other term I use is the merciful teacher. It seems like a lot of type ones are really are teachers of mercy. I think of Richard Rohr and all of his teaching, which is so abundant with compassion and kindness. So, anyway, yeah, say a little bit about your journey with this soul skin.
Yeah. I think what hit me first was the perfectionism. This idea that I seem to have the answer to a particular or to many situations. um, and I'm growing to be more compassionate to myself about that, understanding and accepting the fact that it's not my intent to to criticize everything. Uh, Jesus, but but it's kind of how God made me. It is not an excuse either, right? To
Mhm.
justify it, but in 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 this whole concept of I used to enjoy it more than now, but arguing and Jesus, in and I would be okay by being defeated in an argument if the argument went through. But what tended to happen as I pay attention, I'm thinking of my sister. Uh, the people usually would quit before the argument is over with me, and I said, wait a minute, we we haven't finished. And she would her favorite line would be, Giovanni doesn't like to lose. And I would come back and say, who in the world likes to lose? I mean, that's kind of a hello. Do you like to lose? Show hands. So it was unbearable. It's been unbearable living with me, like you've said in many instances. My sister-in-law just, well, her comment continues to resonate, but she said it a few years ago. Um, the know-it-all, Giovanni, the know-it-all, and I was offended by that.
I can't help myself.
And I said, "Wow, that's the vibe I give, huh? Hmm,
Yeah,
geez." So yeah, in the I guess I'm describing some of the crosses that I have to bear
yeah,
because of.
yeah.
But
Well,
like you said, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I would just, as I've heard from ones, well, first there's this fact that often ones are correct almost all the time. There is a
Thank
certain
you.
accuracy, and it's so that becomes a barrier towards how do I work with people who aren't there? And there's a sense of it's almost like they're wired with this. The ones I know, if I say something that isn't quite on, they'll go, well, wait a second, I want to challenge you on that. I'm going, why? Just because it's not completely true. And then I'll go, oh God, here we go. We're going to have a long conversation about the last sentence of this paragraph. Oh, do I want? So then I go, you're probably right. And they go, well, no, I have to tell you why I'm right. So because I don't want you to not have the information. So it's like there's a sense of, I can remember working with
Duty,
what's that?
a sense of duty
Yes,
to
duty.
enlighten.
Yes, yes, I have this knowledge, and it's part of my responsibility to help you know what's right. So also, it's like from a place of, I don't want you to suffer with finding out you were wrong later on. So I want to help you now. And you seem to think I'm criticizing you. So, but it's a whole sense of, it's like a motivational pattern that, how do I learn to notice I'm in it? Or if I'm projecting, it's one thing to be giving good critique, another to having it being infused with the sense that because you're not getting this, you may ultimately be a bad person, and I grieve for you already. So would you just listen up? So that kind of judgment piece can get mixed up in it.
Oh yeah, very much so. Judgmental. And growing up Catholic, and wanting to be a perfect good little boy
Yeah,
and
saint.
doing all the good Catholic things, and criticizing and getting mad at those that don't do the right thing and getting away with it. How is
Yes.
that possible?
Well, it's almost like being kind of a policeman or policewoman around trying to keep people in order. And as a type 4, I can go to one. And as a little boy, I was like constantly thinking, these people are going to go to hell. They're just not, they don't know that these are mortal sins happening left and right. And I've got to save them, right? And they didn't want to listen to me. Like, here comes Naylor. He's not much fun on the playground. Let's just go someplace else, and have some fun. So,
But I have a question for you,
mhm,
perhaps because now that we're talking, I'm realizing usually I lean to the left
mhm,
on most of all issues, including religion. When I learned that I that the rules were not that the rules would work in my favor, as it were.
mhm,
Um, then even the system of the church, of the Catholic Church,
mhm.
I began to be almost an antagonist. As much as I wanted to be a good little boy, a good Catholic, I realized there's another way of being good Catholic.
Uh-huh,
It
uh-huh.
works for me because I can lean to the left, I don't have to be a traditionalist, as it were.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you square that out?
Well, I wonder, it's a good question, and I wonder if it isn't, the stuff of
A
really,
reformer?
well, the reformer, but yeah, it's like, I would think the one passion is like, okay, here's the structure, but I can see that there's some flaws in the system. It doesn't all quite pan out. There's like this stuff here that doesn't jive with me, right? And I know for myself, I grew up as a Catholic, and I can remember at one point uh, really feeling strongly like, okay, this whole system's set up for me to feel like God is punitive, and I'm supposed to live in fear, and that's going to motivate me to be good. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. That's crazy talk, right? So I started having, thoughts outside of the box, uh, and just feeling like I really want to know what the truth is as much as I can. And so I became a rebel for quite a long period of time. So I don't know why, there's other ones who are just dogmatic and stick with it, and they don't go off the beaten path, or too bad for you, but you're going to end up in hell for eternity. So just things that weren't logical. I just didn't seem like it matched my then evolving idea of God as a compassionate force, and
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. So did you have sit-ins at the church and challenging different biblical? Uh,
When I realized that the system had a lot of flaws in it, it was through teachings of hearing others' opinions,
yeah.
and I was really lucky enough to have a couple of teachers that would uh, speak to, for example, how Jesus would mingle more with the sinners than with the righteous.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Mm,
That's where it's at.
yeah.
And that seed began to take root in my soul
Mm,
and allowed me to sprout new branches
mm,
into my own way of um, revolutionizing, as it were,
mm,
my own Catholicism and the
yeah,
way I would live my own Catholic life.
yeah.
Unbeknownst to me, I mean, this is what I do for a living. I work for the Catholic Church
Mhm,
in the archdiocese,
mm,
and so I am in the belly of the beast, as it were. But it's very interesting that my own sense of good theology, at least from my perspective, obviously, right?
mhm.
Good theology, good spirituality, a healthy relationship with the transcendent finds a niche inside the big structure of the church.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
quite amazing to me.
yeah. Well, and that's an important niche to be nurturing in my world. Yeah, so it's interesting. I wonder if you can relate to this idea. When I can remember my mentor said, well, so I go to point one under pressure sometimes, and I become very judgmental, and of course I'm right and correct and superior, and I have a plan for your life if you just listen, hun. Talking to my wife, she's going, and my mentor said, now don't you have your hands full with yourself? You like really have time to try to transform her? And well, that could be true. He says, no, it is true. If you transform yourself, people will take what they need and leave the rest, but you don't have to track them down and teach them and set them straight. So we did a little exercise where my daughter came up to me and said, hey, Dad, you're an Enneagram teacher. You get really judgmental sometimes. You know that? I said, me? You, Dad. And I took that to my mentor, and he said, okay, try this with your wife and your daughter. Tell them when they feel judged to say, Fred is in the room. Fred is my dad, right? Fred is in the room, and that's a wake up call that you're transmitting judgment. I said, great. So I went to them and told them that, and they were all cheered up, like, all right. So about 4 days later, I'm sitting next to my wife. She gets up and leaves the room abruptly. She never does that. She's a type 2, gentle and kind. My daughter is sitting across from me looking down. So I tracked my wife down and said, what's up? She says, well, I told you 5 times, Fred is in the room. And it went right over your head. I went, oh my God, it's coming back to me. You're right. I was just in a coma. So, that's that sense of that helped me to stop trying to change everyone. But I just wonder for you, that obligation of bringing the truth and changing people, how that's operated in your life, different levels of health and clarity and along the way.
That's a great question. Again, I know this is not about church, but I'm gonna take that as a reference point.
Sure.
Uh, because there's so I find myself blessed because there is so much room. There was so much room in the spiritual life in Catholic faith. I think
Mhm.
that there is possibilities for many voices to be heard.
Yeah.
There was one time in which I was really preoccupied by people getting the wrong idea about God and and, and the wrong understanding about what does it mean to be church.
Mm.
I guess you said it earlier, the interior work, working on myself,
Mhm.
doing my own work,
Mhm.
shadow boxing, Richard Rohr calls it, right? Shadow
Yeah.
box.
Yeah.
Uncovering, bringing some light in being utterly compassionate towards myself,
Yeah.
trying to understand me
Mhm.
forgiving me, loving me, doing work with the inner child, um, understanding the childhood traumas as well. All of that began, I can safely say now, and I appreciate this question for my own mirroring, uh, is beginning to bear fruit, in the sense that I know there is bad theology out there. I know that there is some, yeah, let's just say that.
Hmm.
But I can say, let them do that, and I'll do what is mine to do.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have conferences, and in my work, and there are many different speakers in across the board, you know, in the spectrum of left to right, everybody across the board. And some will be teaching more towards one leaning,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be teaching something on a particular perspective. And everything belongs. I mean,
Yeah.
quoting Richard, everything belongs. And to be okay and to trust that people will find their own voice and their own place.
Yeah.
Being less preoccupied with that
Mm-hmm.
has been very healing,
That's
extremely
awesome.
liberating, because
Yeah.
I don't have to do it all.
Yeah.
Jesus, thank you. As I thought I
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like the inner critic of the one says, if you see there's a problem, you must do something. You're responsible. Like, who says? Well, I do. You got to go do it, or you're lazy, or you're, I think laziness, or you're being bad, but that
irresponsible comes to mind.
irresponsible. Yeah, that's not. You got to go tell the truth and get it out there, and forget whether you're wrong about it. You feel it's right. So, yeah, that kind of learning to temper that with
Yeah.
understanding. Well, people do find their own way, and if those who I might help will, well, there's sort of a joke in I've been in recovery, for many years in AA, and the joke is,
Congratulations.
what's that?
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the joke is, here you are talking to somebody who's struggling with their alcoholism and trying to, let them know the way, and then somebody in the other room is listening, and they get the message and they learn from it and they go live a better life. But it's not usually the one you're trying to transmit it to. It's this idea that you can give that one up, because whoever needs to hear something that's useful, they'll hear it. You don't have to. So it's things will be taken care of in many ways.
If I may, I'd like to go back to, because you said something about your testimony about being in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of relationship, being in the room with men's work, has helped me a
Mm-hmm.
great deal. Sorry,
Let's hear it.
that's my dog. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought that was a bark. I'm grateful my dog is calm right now, but we may hear her later.
Anyways, what you were saying, eh, hearing the testimony of broken men, unafraid,
Yeah.
unapologetic about their condition,
Mm.
their bravery,
Mm.
um, was so, their testimony is such an invitation for me to do the same, to be authentic. Jim Taylor, you know Jim Taylor?
I don't think I do.
Oh, okay. He's another elder in Illuman.
Mhm.
He quotes, I think he quotes scripture or something, but he talks about when we are talking in Illuman, is deep talking unto deep. Your depth,
Mhm.
your honesty, your nakedness invites me to do the same.
Yeah.
And And it's been so freeing, not coercive,
Yeah.
none of that, non-judgmental. It's on your time, you do you, at your own pace. So anyways, I wanted to say that that has also been a hallmark in my own, um I don't know, sanity of being being so obsessive with the ills of the world.
Well, to your point, so one of the things that a lot of spiritual schools would agree with, but particularly AA and the 12 steps, it's this idea you're only as healthy as the company you keep. And
Mm,
so if I'm in the presence of men and women who are speaking deep truth, there's something in me that opens where I become more available and more present to the truth. And it's very infectious. And it's similar to what I noticed at the retreat, the 5 days, is that as men unveiled and came forward, and of course, the leaders did a beautiful job of modeling and telling their story and really sharing, their brokenness. Like we're all in this together. We're all crawling on our hands and knees to the sacred. Nobody's in the lead. Welcome. And that sense of experiencing men drop their protective veils and their sort of, you could say their inner child, that kind of fresh, awake soul popping up, and you see this beautiful man in front of you who, has a soul and he's with you and you feel his kindness. That kind of experience, to be immersed in that for 5 days. I remember just leaving that night and then waking up in the middle of the night and with the person I was staying with and feeling my heart just pumping with kind of this energy, this joy. And the words that kept coming through are, oh my God, oh my God. It's like a prayer, oh my God. And the point being is that that container that everybody participated in, it's a potent force of healing and just makes it easier for me next time to become authentic when I need to. Although I will say that after leaving, after that intense period, it felt like I'd fallen off a cliff into an icy well, like where I was up at the temple, and now I'm back here on Earth, and it's like, oh my God! And it was really a shock for several days. I remember you saying, well, just you don't need to change your job quite yet. Let it percolate. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. So
thank you. Thank you
yeah,
for saying that.
yeah.
Beautiful.
So well, so this one of the things we're talking about is that we have all the patterns in us, but that there's one or two that kind of kick our butts from time to time and kind of takes over. We call it our pet robot. The machine starts going. So for a type one, was just talking with one of my friends. I said, yeah, I can walk into a room and I can immediately spot what's amiss. And I feel it. It's like something must be done. And so it's like when I see imperfections, like this one woman said, I can see if the pictures aren't mounted correctly, and my whole body goes, and I feel like I must go do something. And she said, I have type one my relationships to death, and boy, I'm telling you, I'm working on it, learning how not to sort of be taken by that kind of gut feeling, because ones are often very gut feeling types. They feel the truth from the gut, forget the other stuff. And so I wonder, like, how do you notice that in your body when you're starting to get caught up in that type one pattern?
It was recent that I learned, and then I began to identify, and then, oh yeah, that's true, that I received this bodily reaction.
Hmm.
Almost, my heart starts uh, rapidly beating, and
Mm-hmm.
ah, my neck, and then
Body gets tight.
tighten. Yeah, I get tightened. Um, especially like if there's a conversation going, I live in meetings. You know, if somebody asks me, what do you do for a living? Meetings. We have meetings every time. So, and when I want to say something, there is this urgency in me that needs to say it because it's so important that everybody hears what I have to say. And so what happens is I, a part of me is saying, relax, let's wait. But another part of me is, I'm gonna lose my chance. They're not gonna get to hear it. What if they change the topic? Or you know,
Well, it's like an
it,
immediate. There's like an immediacy to it. Like,
it's an immediacy. It's almost compulsive, a
yeah,
compulsiveness,
yeah,
compulsion about
yeah,
wanting to say what I have to say.
yeah.
So I've written myself a couple of notes. I don't have them here right now on my screen, but it says, when in my better days, wait until a woman has spoken. Wait until two people have gone before you.
Mhm,
And I also write it down. Write it down and
mhm,
see
mhm.
if what you want to say needs to be said. If it's important, if no, not if it's important, because you think it's important, but if it actually is going to help,
Hmm.
or if it, what happens if you don't say it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So little tips here and there would help me oh, and breathe. So putting oxygen in my blood flow, putting oxygen onto my muscles, and falling in the trust that if if the spirit invites me,
Mhm.
it will be by, excuse me,
It's okay.
it will be by invitation. And
Yeah.
so whether the invitation comes verbally by a member of the group, or if it naturally feels like, okay, um there's a time now to do it, you know, organically, more less forcefully.
Mhm.
And so, and there's been some instances in which I'm really surprised that I've stayed
Hmm.
quietly for intentionally, and then somebody says, Giovanni, would you like to say something about it? It's almost like you haven't said anything. That's not like you. So I kind of I find that amusing. I
Hmm.
think it's a way of the universe winking at me,
Mhm.
saying you've been a good boy, you waited your turn, here you go.
Yeah, well, it's a great noticing because it's like the compulsion of the one can be, if a truth is not being addressed, it's like almost something pulls me to, like, I must do it, I must speak. Uh, and uh, and then the difference that I was picking up is a sense of, from a more centered place, I might feel a more relaxed invitation to say something, as opposed to, my, I could say my that pull of personality to, to be the one and to tell the truth and, clear up the confusion once and for all. That's why I'm in your life. I mean, come on. But that, you know, uh, noticing the difference between like something that's coming from a more peaceful center and one that's coming from your personality pattern, where the inner critic's saying, you're responsible. You better get in there, otherwise you're lazy and you're not being dutiful. And that can take a lot of time to sort those two voices out. Um, but it tends to be more relaxed as I become aware. And I think there's something about sensing the body as being a kind of grounding for noticing when my personality is jumping out of my skin. There's certainly in the practice, I've been involved in Gurdjieff work and diamond heart work for many years, and there's this practice of learning to sense your body and your sensation as a practice each morning, so that when your personality starts to get charged up, you feel it in your physicality before you start, being taken down the road. So
Mm.
I wondered what kind of mindfulness practices have been helpful for you.
Um, Centering prayer. And I have to say, I preach it better than I practice it.
Mhm. We all do.
We all do, right? I mean, here's the disclaimer,
I'm still trying to catch up to my words, that's for sure.
right? Yes, yes. Thank you for saying that. So true. But eh, I think I've come to understand um, that just being present, to be intentionally present to what is in the present moment, uh, it's a beautiful thing. It's a very healthy thing. Um, Thich Nhat Hanh, right, is quoted to say, if you wash the dishes and you're thinking of something else, that's not working. Just wash the dishes.
Mhm,
And that's a good practice. I like to wash the dishes because I like to feel the flow of the water,
mhm,
the working of the
mhm,
sponge against the dish or the pan, whatever it is that I'm trying to
mhm,
do. Um, Practicing the being present is it's been tremendously helpful and so healing and relaxing.
mhm,
Together with that, being in nature, being exposed to something other than the human, whatever we have created, whether it's cement or whether it's whatever it is, but
mhm.
um, being in touch with the dog, the fur,
Yeah,
listening to the birds, they grace me, coming to a little tree that we have here of roses, and how they nest in there, and the hummingbirds that would come every so often. Taking walks with my wife, we are lucky to have a little trail here with
mm,
some native vegetation. uh oh my God, the sunrise, the
mm,
sunset, the stars, the moon,
mm,
allowing myself to be touched, invited by other than human, uh, rocks, ocean.
yeah.
I think no one can go wrong with that, with doing that. Yeah.
Well, when I grew up in Catholicism, I call myself a recovering Catholic at this point, but nature wasn't much mentioned, right? Mostly there was sin and, watch your step and make sure you confess, and you're probably bad, so good luck on making it to heaven. And so there was kind of a gloom that was a part of which was too bad, because there were some priests that were really lovely, but they weren't as many as the ones who would rail against the sins. And so,
Mm,
but that's what I found so powerful with this whole retreat, was this, and also awaken when I was at that up in Virginia, that idea of really, I think Richard said something like, you need to learn to be able to read nature the way you can read a book. That
mm,
there's something there of a deep healing nature that it will be a part of what heals you. And that was just, I think I had one of the deepest experiences of that, sort of coming into, I'm alive in this force of nature, and I get to be in it. I'm surrounded in it, and something touches me, and it felt almost like, with the retreat, I felt like all the ancestors got called into that room through the drumming and just the loving kindness, and it's like, whoa, this is a powerful, powerful prayer that I'm getting to be a part of. And how there was no walls up, you could see nature around you, and when it was cold, you would feel cold, and if you were on the floor, you were really cold. It's like this is like boot camp, man. This is like we're doing the real thing here. We're going like right down to the raw nerve. But yeah, it was very powerful, very powerful. I really appreciated that.
Wow. It
Mm.
was, Michael, so edifying, and the sacredness of the drum itself, even though some drums were made of artificial hide. I mean, to think that the wood and an animal skin would coalesce to bring us together, eh,
Yeah,
it's powerful.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's quite, yeah, quite powerful. And uh, yeah, well, so just back to oneness and sort of one of the things, like for the type one, they have an arrow to 4 and 7. And the arrow to 4 has something around learning to, I think, surrender to woundedness as a little guy, little gal, inner child stuff. 4, that can be a real doorway, along with, diving into the depths of emotional intimacy and connection, authenticity. That's all 4 stuff. So you've got an arrow going there. And then you have an arrow to 7, which is inviting you to engage in causeless joy and celebration simply because you're on the planet in this abundant opportunity. But there's a sense of, so for the type one, sometimes the type ones can be a little strict and a little bit of people say, I wish you would lighten up. You're kind of serious. Like, you got an iron vest on there or what? I mean, like, chill out. But as the one matures and grows and the heart opens, these doorways to 4 of, having access to feeling my heart. And also a lot of creative forces can be available too in terms of expressing oneself. And then going to 7, it's a sense of just seeing the inherent joy of life and being able to relax and not have to earn it necessarily. Like it's just here. Hallelujah. It just got handed to me. So any of those sort of pathways resonate for you in terms of your growth process?
I love your questions. And in this one particularly, I really am enjoying it. Um, somehow, I would lie to you if I tell you that I know how, but somehow, the doorway to woundedness and intimacy became very easy to me. Um,
Mm.
I don't know how that happened. There is, I must say, all modesty aside,
Mm.
um, some of the gifts people would often, in my growing up years and into my teen years, people would often say that I had some sort of innocence about me.
Mhm.
And I didn't know exactly what they meant. But I'm gonna just guess that it was such a tenderness, disposition about my personality
Mhm.
that later on helped me to tend to my wounded self
Mhm.
and to recognize that I have been wounded in my early years,
Mhm.
probably pre-birth, during my growing up years, and so on and so forth. Now, the dark side of it too is that I could easily play the victimhood card as well,
Mhm.
very easily. So I slippery slope, right?
Mhm.
I can be very much open to intimacy, open to sensibility. Um, Feminist approaches speak very clearly to me.
Mhm.
I welcome you know, the what do you call the one that the underdog. I
Mhm.
root for the underdog easily,
Mhm.
easily,
Mhm.
not because I want to, but just that's where I go almost naturally.
Mhm.
Uh, but also I can think of myself, oh, poor me, my wife is not paying attention to me,
Mhm.
and get into the jealousy
Mhm.
issues right away.
Mhm.
So yeah, the veil is very thin. So that about the four, and thank you for saying that. It's so enlightening.
Mhm.
Now about the seven, again, I think I have an easiness about enjoying life.
Hmm.
At one point, in the Myers-Briggs, I am an extrovert,
Uh-huh. Okay.
but I've grown to be much more comfortable being an introvert than an
Mhm.
extrovert.
Yeah.
So I really like my quiet time. I
Mhm.
gain a lot of energy from being alone, and I, I love music, but I don't have to have music,
Mhm.
especially when I'm home. I like the quiet. I like the quiet of home.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when I'm in the car, I have to play music, otherwise I might fall asleep. But at any rate, so where am I going? Okay, so joy and happiness. I can be the life of a party if I'm in that position.
Yeah.
I love to dance. I love to sing. I love to live life to the fullest. You understand?
Awesome. Yeah.
I uh, being in the present moment comes easy to me because I am there 110%. Whatever it is that we're gonna
Yeah.
do it, and that's all we're gonna do right now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really rare when I'm thinking of something else when I'm doing something.
Yeah. Well,
So
that. Go ahead.
probably the the dark side is that sometimes I miss the forest for the trees, as it were,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I'm not probably paying attention to other things that are happening. I'm so focused on one thing
Mhm.
that, and my wife kind of gives me grief about it, like nobody's paying attention to these other things. Hey, I'm doing the one thing.
I'm
Don't
doing.
blame me.
It's my practice. Well, I recall something that Gurdjieff said. He says, you must learn that when you're drinking tea from a cup, that you're doing it with all of your attention. That's all there is the tea and the cup. And whatever you do to bring your attention there. But to your point, uh, like, well, surround sound attention is probably a good thing too. Can I do them both, right? But yeah, well, that's great because I really saw your celebratory zeal at the retreat, and really appreciated your joyfulness. And I think the healthier the one is, or by healthy I mean the more their heart is open, the more they have access to that sort of the joy of life. I can feel it. I can go there, and I can go to the fore and go into the depths and feel, be emotionally honest and not be afraid of what's in the shadow, or at least dive into it. And then there's also with that fore, it's like a lot of times ones will have as they go more as they access this fore, it's like they'll notice, oh, I've got this creative thing of writing or poetry or painting or music. And I'm just curious if you have anything like that that sort of pops up as an expression for you.
Yeah, I like singing. I play the guitar,
Hmm.
strumming some chords. Um, I like to read poetry as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so those are the things. And I like to venture into things that I don't usually practice, but I like to give it a shot, like
Yeah.
painting. I'm not a painter,
Hmm.
but I've created a couple of art pieces, and I'm like, hey, that's not so bad. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but again, and the reason I'm saying I'm not a painter is simply because I don't have that practice. I'd have to really think about it and set aside the time and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Not a thing that comes very naturally to me. But
Yeah.
I wanna, if I may,
Yeah.
eh, about the joy, eh, it didn't come that easy, especially in my teen years. Everything was more about duty, and and it was this constant pull between what's fun and what's dutiful, what's responsible. And I
Mm.
was the youth group leader back then in the late 80s. Um, and everybody would take off to the park or say, let's go to the beach. And I'm like, wait a minute, we have to clean the hall before we leave. You know how many times I've stayed by myself cleaning the hall? All these all these suckers, they left me there because they wanted to go have fun. But I had such a sense of responsibility. At one point, Michael, I couldn't believe. I'm kind of. I have to forgive myself about this because I was. Uh, I left so much. I loved soccer. I was playing soccer for my school,
Mm.
and somebody made a comment about, well, are you going to devote less time to the youth group now? And I dropped the soccer.
No, no.
I did. Isn't that awful? I mean, I enjoyed the youth group too, but
Yeah, yeah.
it,
But that
the
sense of
sense of duty,
duty, yeah,
the
and
sense of where my priorities needed to be, not where
yeah,
I wanted them to be,
yeah, yeah,
but where they needed to be according to the head up here.
yeah, yeah.
And I dropped the soccer, and I always this constant thing about I gotta do what I have to do. Fun will be
Last.
late.
Yes. Well, and that's certainly the story that many ones have said. It's like, okay, here I am. There's something to be cleaned up. Everybody's gone to the beach. What the hell? What's going on here? And they clean it up and they're growling, and then it happens again, and it happens again, and it's just like just seems to be a pattern that you finally go, I'm done with this pattern now. And I think the other thing I've noticed with ones is that learning to give themselves permission to love what they love and to have time for it. Initially, the voice is, if you're having fun, you're not being responsible. Fun is last, way last. Maybe just before you die, you can have some fun. But good people, you want to be a good person, a holy person, put that fun off, as opposed to, the Dalai Lama would say, start with the fun and then let's see what happens, right? Or Desmond Tutu, the same way. Like, if you're not
Oh
having
no, the
fun,
world's gonna fall apart, man.
yeah,
What are you talking about?
chaos, chaos, right? I've got my hands in the dark and no one else is here with me. And but yeah, it's quite a sort of trance to move through. And on the other side of it, there's more freedom and a sense of humor. That's what I appreciate about Richard Rohr, how he kind
Yes.
of pokes fun at himself. He's just such a, talking about his pridefulness and how he knew how this should go, and then he discovered that people did fine without him, and it grew, and all that good stuff. And that's awesome.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, yeah. It's so good. This is so good because now I can relax a little bit more. I
Mhm.
even tell myself, go take a nap. You need you're falling asleep here, you're nodding and you're trying to do stuff. Just go take a nap.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
I see other there's working in the church, there's a lot of workaholism involved in there.
Hmm.
And sometimes I find myself guilty for not working as hard as my other as my other colleagues. And my spiritual director recently said to me, when I said this to him, he kind of reacted. He says, well, you're not a workaholic. And it was like, oh, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
so good for me to know.
I can relax here. I don't have to drive myself to the ground. It's like the script of the one is, I must work as hard as I possibly can and expend all my energy to get to the goal, and anything less is kind of a failure. Like, so you know,
And you
that,
know the thing about that, Michael, is that, and here is something that is probably a little contradictory about my oneness, but I've spotted myself, I tend to be lazy, you know.
mhm,
So this thing about effort
mhm,
um doesn't come very easily to me.
mhm.
I have to work, I have to put effort to get effort. You know, understand
Okay,
what
yeah, okay, yeah.
eh, I'm a classical procrastinator. You know, oh, I'll take care. I can do that in a half hour. I'll do it later. When in reality, I overestimate myself in that
Mhm,
regard. You
yeah.
know, so time management,
Mm,
planning ahead,
mm,
all of that has been a problem for me.
mhm.
It's I don't think it's very one in that regard.
Yeah, well, it could be a reflection of your instincts, and I don't know if you know about the instinctual stack, but that would be another conversation I'd be glad to have with you. Or it could be that you have a nine wing, and the nine wing is under stress. I can just kind of chill out and wait, and I don't need to get going. When I'm healthy, I'm on it, but I can also, when I'm less healthy, I can kind of drift off and not feel any motivation to get activated. I
That's
think
very
the one all by itself tends to, you know, we say when the unhealthier they are, the more they strive and get more perfectionistic. But it sounds like that you have a different sort of doorway that you go to. That like I gotta work myself. I gotta work to work. I gotta get energy going and. Um, yeah, so that, we could have another conversation about that for sure.
good.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great noticing because all of these patterns, um, you know, I'm a type 4 and I can look at the patterns and I go, well, about 75% of those are right on. The other 25% just isn't a part of my program, right? So, there's deviations, I think, and different things can affect that. But I wanted to bring up one other thing that I thought was really interesting, which is when you used to like to argue. And I was thinking, watching like,
I still do, but I'm I am I am less prone to wanting to spend that time there. You know,
yeah.
the way I figured is okay, this is not functional anymore.
I think it's had my way with me. Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, go ahead.
there's a woman, Elizabeth Warren, who was
Uh,
a senator from Massachusetts, and whenever she's been on the Senate floor taking on Wells Fargo for ripping off the American people for 500 million, the thing I always notice is she comes so prepared. She knows all the information. And it's like, come on, let's have an argument. I'm up for this. And she gets excited and she just floors him and it comes so quick. And like she's grooving, so there's like something about the one where, good sparring and, it kind of cheers me up. I like it. There's something about it, that engagement that, is feels good. So it sounds like that's something that you can draw on and maybe notice when it's going on too long. But yeah, it's interesting. Interesting.
yeah, yes. Um, uh, it's the thing is that an argument, uh, especially when I would enjoy it most. See, the thing is that I've come to realize, uh, maybe it's the way the world we live in has been more polarized. That I don't
Mhm.
know
Mhm.
if I've given up on the attitudes that arguing in the better sense of the word and the better sense of the practice is really a debate and
Mhm.
let's come to an enlightenment
Mhm.
based on the ideas presented.
Yeah.
Whereas if, but I don't think we come to arguing like that anymore. and we come to, this is my truth and this is your truth,
Mhm.
and we're gonna get at it like this, and then we're gonna go in our merry ways with our initial truths.
Yeah,
Have we gained anything from one another? And that's a problem. And maybe I'm not entirely sure. I'm gonna have to study myself, and let's see how that is operating. But I'm having a, I guess that I just kind of grew tired of that.
yeah, yeah, because there's no fruition that comes from it. Yeah, we are quite, the world is quite polarized, and in a frightening way for me. Just like there's no reconciling of differences, and there's more like, okay, now that you have the other opinion, I must kill you. What can I do? I have no other choice.
Yeah, it is so enriching, right? And it's enriching, and but it does feel like dying too when you have those conversations in which you walk away knowing that you've left something behind. You've actually died to something,
Yeah, yeah.
but you are a different person
Mhm.
because you've also gained something from the other person or the other persons in the group.
Yeah.
But it has to feel. Maybe I'm wrong, but it has to feel some sense of woundedness.
Mhm.
Almost, the image I'm having is going into battle without having to have killed anyone,
Mhm.
but it's a sparring,
Mhm.
"Okay,
Mhm.
we're
Yeah,
gonna
have a good
we're
boxing
not gonna
match.
leave unscathing, we're
Yeah,
gonna have some scars after this,
yeah,
but we're
yeah.
gonna be bigger and better and
Mm,
richer."
mm. Yeah, I like that. I like
Mhm.
that. Yeah, well, just thank you so much. We've covered a lot of territory, and we might have transformed the world, but probably not. But we have,
Probably.
but I certainly got a lot from listening to you, and just really a joy to be with you, and just to hear your story, and just your presence. Really is beautiful. So I'm going to turn off the
Thank you.
recording, and then so let's see, where is the turn off button? Oh, stop.